Hi, my name is Roland and today we're going to have a look on ranorex code modules. Next to recording modules, you can also work with code modules in ranorex Studio. They can be used the same way as recording modules. For example, you can simply drag and drop them directly from the module browser into your test suite to build up a test case. Also, variables can be created and bound the same way, either by checking them in a drop-down or by using the auto-bind functionality. But let's start at the very beginning. Why should someone use a code module? So what's the benefit out of using ranorex code modules? First of all, you're much more flexible because you can use conditions or loops, for example. Next to that, you can access a bunch of functionality because you do have access to the whole .NET framework. You can work with real programming languages, namely C# and Visual Basic.NET, and finally, maybe you're used to code and you do have development skills in your team. Let's see how we can create a new code module. There are several ways to create a new code module. You could use the button in the toolbar, or you could use the context menu. Once you created a new module, the position you normally start coding is at the end of the existing run method. To access and automate UI elements, you can simply use the ranorex repository. Drag and drop any UI element from your repo directly into your code file. Using the code completion feature, it's comfortable to choose any of the given methods, for example a mouse click. Of course, next to performing an automated mouse click, it's also possible to set any values or properties of the UI element. For example, setting a password in a text field. And that's it for the first two actions. So what's happening here? The first line simply sets the password in the login dialog for Keybase application. The second one clicks the OK button. Let's run it directly out of the code module. I just demonstrated how ranorex assists us in creating a variable pointing to any UI element. This was initiated by drag and drop. Once we do have a variable pointing to the repository, it's easy to automate UI elements. We can access them using the structure from the repository. To finish this smoke test, I just add one additional line to finally close our system under test. So let's run this simple script out of the ranorex test suite. Until now, I showed how to automate UI elements using the repository. With ranorex, this is also possible without using the repo, with all pros and cons. One use case for accessing UI elements without a repository is to handle list of elements. If we would like to loop through a list of UI elements, this could be done easily by using any of the provided find methods, but we have to provide the ranorex path. Let's get a list of all buttons in the toolbar by using the host.local.find and passing the corresponding ranorex path as a parameter. Of course, we can use the reporting class here as well. This piece of code loops through all the buttons in the toolbar from Keybase application. The mouse pointer will be moved to every button and a screenshot will be done. Additionally, a simple message is sent to the report. Let's see how that works. Next to the find method, there are additional functions like, for example, find single, which returns a single UI element as a result only. For more information, we can always have a look on the detailed API documentation for each method. One additional way to access UI elements I'd like to present is to drag and drop items from the SPI directly into the code file. Again, the ranorex repository is not in use and the UI elements are accessed directly by using the ranorex path. Please keep in mind that most of the time using the repository even on the code level makes sense and is recommended. What's happening if ranorex tries to automate a UI element that does not exist at the moment? In that case, ranorex breaks the test execution and stops with an error message similar to this. How can we avoid that? Let's do a short example. In KeyPass, a dialog indicating the existence of a new update may pop up after the login. On the other hand, if the program is already up to date, no dialog comes up. For test automation, handling dialogs that pop up occasionally is a challenge. To handle that and to avoid a failure in case of a non-existing UI element, we can do a safe access. This can be done by using the info object that every repository element contains. On the code level, we simply verify the existence of the dialog like this. We confirm the dialog by clicking the close button only if it actually exists. If the dialog does not come up, we only send a text message to the report. Doing so, the info object allows us to safely find out if a UI element exists at the moment without having any problems or exceptions if the element does not exist. In both cases, test execution continues as expected. The last part of this screencast will explain how variables can be created and used in ranorex code modules. Quite similar to the way we are using variables in recording modules, we can do the same in code modules as well. To create a new variable, simply click the Insert Module Variable menu item in the context menu. It's always recommended to use meaningful default values. Once the variable is created, it is presented in the module browser as usual. Next to that, in the test suite, a command is indicating the unbound state. Let's use this variable for data-driven testing, a simple search method in our system under test KeyPass. Exactly the same way how we do data binding in recording modules, we can now bind the variable to external data, for example an Excel file. Therefore, we first of all have to create a new data source, which will act as a bridge between the Excel file and our variable. Simply click the Browse button to define the path to the Excel file. As a last step, we have to bind the variable to the column of the data source, namely the Excel file. This can be done by clicking the Data Binding menu item and checking the variable in the drop-down. Alternatively, if the names are identical, we could use the auto-binding functionality. For detailed information on binding variables and data-driven testing, please watch our screencast about data-driven test automation with ranorex. The newly created variable is now bound to the first column in the Excel sheet, and therefore the whole test case is executed for every data row in the Excel file, 2 times in that case. Let's see what this code module actually is supposed to do. The content of the variable, which is bound to the column in the Excel file, is set to the search text in KeyPass. After that, ranorex simulates pressing the Enter key to execute the search. As we see here, we can work with the .NET framework as well. We can simply access the string manipulation functionality and, for example, set the content of the variable to lowercase. Now, let's simply run this data-driven code module from the test suite.